Hey guys, let's talk about ancient Rome. So here we are, the rise of the Roman Republic. First, we talk about the geography of Rome. I'm not the best at drawing, but okay, let's see. I'm going to erase this. So this is Europe. And Italy, here, this is the Mediterranean Sea. Man, sorry. Mediterranean Sea. All of this is the Mediterranean Sea. And Italy is a peninsula that comes down into the Mediterranean Sea. Mountains are here. These are the Alps. So it kind of separates Italy from the rest of Europe. And the Alps, they don't stop right there. They go on like this. The Alps. And then right through the middle of Italy, there are more mountains. And these are called the Apennines. But the rest of this land is mostly kind of flat plains that they can farm. And it was made a big advantage for Italy versus Greece. Greece, which was, we all remember, because I've drawn it a million times, Greece was all mountains with little city-states in between the mountains. There was no farmland. If an army from this city-state wanted to come over here, they'd have to go all the way over the mountains. But in Italy, an army from here could easily march all the way down here and conquer, and then could come all the way up here and conquer. It was easy. So Rome had a much easier job conquering all of Italy than the Spartans had trying to conquer all of Greece. So it was easier for farming, easier for unification, making everything unified, unity, one area. So if this is Italy, Rome is about here. There was a community called the Etruscans that lived up here. The Etruscans, that's an S, the Etruscans, and people from Greece had come and had settled down here. So we had Greeks down here, and we had Etruscans up here, and the area that Rome was in was a region called Latium. And the people that lived in Latium spoke Latin. Okay, you got all that? I hope you got all that. We've got Latium, Rome, Etruscans, Greeks. People that lived in Latium spoke Latin. Okay, then we've got the myth of the founding. That's an S. An F. The myth of the founding of Rome. I found a little video. I'm going to play a little video for you. Okay, this is the myth of the founding of Rome.
Long ago, in the kingdom of Latium, the good king Numitor, known for his wisdom and generosity, was dethroned by his evil brother, Prince Amulius. At the same time, Amulius banished Numitor's daughter, the beautiful Princess Sylvia, to the temple of Mars, the god of war. There, thought Amulius, she would never have sons who might reclaim the throne. But his plan didn't work as expected. For Sylvia married Mars, and somewhat later, the couple had twin sons, whom they named Romulus and Remus. It did not take long for news of the twins' birth to reach Amulius, who immediately ordered two of his servants to kidnap the newborns and drown them in the Tiber River. That very night, the two men crept into the room where the twins lay sleeping, and once there, began to carry out their terrible mission. The next morning, the servants reported to Amulius that Romulus and Remus were dead. But in fact, they were not. The twins' cradle bobbed and dipped like a tiny boat in the rushing waters, but it did not overturn as expected, nor did it sink. Instead, the cradle eventually came to rest in a clump of rushes. After a while, the babies awakened and began to cry from cold and hunger. Now, as it happened, a she-wolf was nearby that morning and heard the newborns cry. She was curious and went to investigate. The animal was puzzled by these tiny humans, but she sensed their despair, and although she feared people, her motherly instincts overcame her, and she carried the two youngsters to her cave, where she reared them as her own. As the months passed, Romulus and Remus grew strong and healthy, and in time they began to venture out farther and farther from their cave. One day, a shepherd named Faustulus noticed the boys as they chased each other down a path. The shepherd was struck by their curious clothing and their wolf-like gait. He followed them to their cave and was, to say the very least, astonished at what he saw. Now Faustulus and his wife were childless, so later that night, while the wolves slept, he came to take the youngsters to his home. For many years, Faustulus and his wife took care of the twins as if they were their own sons, although at first the boys found it difficult to eat as humans. In time, Romulus and Remus grew strong and handsome. Even so, they never completely lost all their wild, wolf-like ways. They helped Faustulus with his herding, and when they weren't in the pastures, the twins took to ambushing thieves who had stolen livestock and food. Then they returned the stolen goods to their rightful owners. Over the years, stories of the twins' brave deeds spread far and wide, until, one day, reports of their exploits reached their grandfather Numitor, who, banished to the far northern reaches of the kingdom, had led a lonely life for many years. The old man wanted to meet the brave young heroes, and so he asked his guards to find the twins and bring them back. As soon as he saw them, Numitor was struck by their resemblance to his daughter Sylvia. And when Romulus and Remus told him their story, he realized what had happened.
You are my grandsons. My daughter, the Princess Sylvia, is your mother. Your wicked Uncle Amulius tried to kill you and has stolen your birthright. Now that you know these things, you must take the throne for me so that one day it can be yours.
When the two brothers returned home, they began to plan how they would accomplish this task. First, they decided to recruit as soldiers all whom they had helped over the years. Then, their army would attack Amulius and his forces as they slept. Finally, they would take their army to the Temple of Mars to rescue their mother. And because Romulus and Remus were cunning and brave, their plan worked. Sylvia returned to the castle, and Numitor regained his throne. To commemorate their victory, the twins decided to build a great city on the banks of the Tiber River, where the she-wolf had found them. Romulus designed the streets and houses, Remus the temples and baths. And, in time, a magnificent city blanketed the 7 hills that stood near the river. But what was it to be called? Remus said it should be called Rem, because he had designed the temples. Romulus wanted the city to be named Rome, because he had designed the houses. And because both brothers retained the wildness of their early upbringing, they began to fight savagely. So savagely, in fact, that the fight ended only when Remus lay dead. And so, Rome was given its name. In time, Romulus became king of the city named after him, and ruled wisely and compassionately for many years. Because he had done so many good and noble things, the gods looked favorably upon him. And so, when he died, he was taken to where the gods dwelled. From that time on, he was called Quirinus, and became a noble god of war.
That's the story that I was taught, the myth of the founding of Rome. And it's very, very similar anytime. You know, it's a little different in our cultural studies book, but that's because they don't want to dedicate all that time to just telling that one myth. But that's the myth. So, okay, that was the myth. The reality is that in about the year 800 BCE, 7 hills, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's put the 7th one there. 7 hills, people made little villages on the top of these hills. I'm not going to spend the time to draw all of that, but on top of 7 hills, people made villages. At one point, in between 2 of the hills, they drained a swamp that had been here. This had been really, really wet, marshy swampland, and they drained it and made it dry. And here they made a forum. The forum has all the temples and the market and all the political buildings. It's what we today consider like the downtown of a city. And they put it all in between these 2 hills. And eventually, all 7 of the hills joined to make one big city because, you know, more and more people were born, more and more people moved in, and the villages ended up joining and making one big city called Rome. That's the true story of how Rome started. Just remember, they started on 7 hills. 7 hills. In between 2 of the hills, they drained the land and made the forum. All right. And these hills serve as great defense from enemies. Why is that? Why would a hill be defensive? Because let's say your enemy is coming from here. If you're standing on top of the hill, you can see your enemy from a long way away. That's their huge eyeball looking, and you can see your enemy from a really long way away. So hills are pretty awesome that way. Also, the river that flows through this valley goes all the way out to the ocean. Let's say here is the Mediterranean Sea, and the river can take them all the way here. They can get little boats. Little boats can go all the way down this river But if their enemy comes up with a huge army ship, this ship can't go on this river. Little bitty, cute little bitty boats can, but great big army warring ships, they can't go up this river. So it's more difficult for their enemy to get to them. That's the whole point. It's more difficult for their enemy, more difficult for the enemy to get to Rome. Now, in the early days of Rome, Rome was a monarchy. Means they had a king. Their seventh king, the seventh king of Rome, was Tarquin the Proud. And Tarquin the Proud, just like all the other kings of Rome, the kings of Rome were the number one in the army. They led the army. They were the number one priest. That means they led the religion. And they were the number one judge. They were the ultimate top superior judge. And then the kings were kind of guided and helped to rule by the Senate. Senate comes from a Latin word, senex, which means old man. So the Senate was a group of old men from the aristocracy, the rich old men helped the king rule Rome. Well, the seventh king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, was not a good man. He was a terrible leader. He was mean to his people, and the people overthrew him. And they turned Rome into a republic. A republic is where citizens get to vote for their rulers. So that was pretty cool. It went from a monarchy to a republic, and that was in the year 509 BCE. 509 BCE, the people of Rome overthrew Tarquin the Proud and turned Rome into a republic. All right. So, I'm going to draw my pathetic little version of Italy. Don't forget, here are the Alps. And here are the Apennines. So Rome was right about here. And some Greeks had come and settled down here. And so let's see, Rome was part of the region Latium. And then just north of Rome, I've made my map a little off, but up here were the Etruscans. The Etruscans were really, really good builders and artists. And they had a written language. And the Greeks had super cool myths. they had these really cool myths and legends and heroes. And the Romans, the people from Rome are called Romans. They went up here and they learned a lot about building and art and writing language from the Etruscans. They came down here and they learned a whole bunch about mythology and legends and heroes from the Greeks. So the Etruscans had a written language. The Etruscans based their written letters on the Greeks. And then Latium, Latin, the Latin language, their written words were based on Etruscan. And then the Romans based their letters off Latin. So Greek to Etruscan to Latin to Roman. And Roman letters are the same letters that I'm writing in right now. These are Roman letters. And they came down here and they learned a whole bunch from the Greeks, and they totally took the Greeks' myths and called them their own. The same stories. They took the same stories from Greece, from Greek mythology. They took their stories and they said, oh, these are our stories now. And the only thing they did was they changed the names a little bit. They even went so far as to say that Greek, the old Greek heroes are Roman heroes. So there was this guy, oops, that's an E, Aeneas, that's an E right there, sorry, is a story from Homer's Iliad. Do you guys know, when we were learning about the Jews, do you remember who the Jewish people say is like the father of their people? Hopefully you remember that is Abraham. And all Jews look back and say that Abraham is the father of their people. Well, Romans say that the father of their people is this guy, Aeneas. But Aeneas is actually a character from a Greek poem from Homer's Iliad. All right, so they took that. If you ever get confused for your whole life, if you ever get kind of confused about, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, which one is which, you're not the only one. Lots of people get confused about what's Greek mythology and what's Roman mythology. And that's because they're all the same stories. They're just different names. And unless you're really, really interested in Greek mythology or Roman mythology, and you've studied it because you really want to, then you're probably going to get confused. People get confused about those. All right, so draw my little Italy again. So here's which mountains are these again? These are the Alps. Which mountains are these? The Apennines. Rome is about here. Rome built a fierce army. I mean, they were fierce. And by the 200s, well, the late 200s, so that means, you know, like, I don't know, maybe 280, 290. By the late 200s, Rome had conquered all of Italy. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know, Italy. There we are, all of Italy. So tiny little Rome here that had started on 7 hills and then grown into a city has now turned into they've covered this one little city has now grown and has taken over the entire peninsula. The whole thing is all ruled by Rome. Pretty cool. How did they do that? Well, Rome had a really, really strong army. The basis of the Roman army is called a legion. And a legion has anywhere from 4,500 to 5,000 members. But inside a legion is a smaller group called a maniple. You can think of this as, think of it here at school at AIS. All of us together are one school, but we have individual classes that operate separately, and our individual classes could be the maniples. And these, so the enemies, maybe the Greek, the different armies, they all worked as one huge section. Here are our soldiers. I'm going to keep going. And they moved as a block all together. Well, the maniples could break up into smaller groups. Maniples were between 60 and 160 soldiers, and they could break off and go fight their own little fights and then come back together as one. And that was a really big deal back then. That was unheard of. Nobody fought like that. And so the fact that they could break up and go through an area or break up and surround an enemy, that's big news. That's how their army conquered all of Italy. They also did these really cool things where they built roads. Let's say this is Rome, and these are random other city-states around Italy. And every time Rome would go to attack a city-state, they built a road. Every time they went to attack, they built a road to it. I'm drawing all my roads. There we are. And so there was a saying, all roads lead to Rome. And that's because Rome is where they began, and they set off with an army, and they would build their road all the way to the city-state they were going to attack. But then once the war was over, these roads served a great purpose. Now trade is easy. Going back and forth is easy. I don't know, maybe you just wanted to go on holiday and go visit Rome. Well, there's a road to get there now. So Rome did this all over Italy, all over the whole country. Here's Rome. They built roads all the way throughout the whole country. They built roads. And another way that they won was every time Rome would conquer every time Rome would come here and conquer a city-state, they would make this city-state sign a treaty. And the treaty says, okay, we're friends with you, Rome. We're not going to fight with you. And anytime you want to conquer another city-state, this city-state had to send soldiers to help. So Rome conquers this place, and then Rome says they want to conquer this place. So Rome goes to these guys and says, you have to send us soldiers to help. So they send soldiers down here to Rome. They join the Roman army, and all of them together go to conquer this city-state. Now, Rome says they want to conquer this city-state. So now this one has to send soldiers to help, and this one has to send soldiers to help. Now they're even stronger, and they go over here and they conquer this one. Now Rome decides they want to conquer this one. This one has to send soldiers. This one has to send soldiers. This one has to send soldiers. And now all of them together go over and conquer this one. And then so on and so on and so on and so on. Let's say they want to conquer this one. Now, this one has to send soldiers to help. 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 And now they go over here and they conquer this one. So the Roman army is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more fearsome and scarier every time they conquer one city-state. Their army gets stronger. So think like, let's say they've conquered this one and 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 this one. Now they want to conquer this last one. This one has to send soldiers, and this one sends 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 soldiers, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. This little city-state right here, they're not gonna stand a chance. Rome is gonna walk in there and bulldoze right over them. Now they're all part of Rome, and there are roads to go to each of them. Now, people from here can get all the way over here pretty easily. They can just follow the road, just like that. And, so soldiers that fought. If a soldier fought from this city-state to help Rome conquer, let's say, this city-state, once they have proven their dedication to Rome, Rome would give them citizenship. And that's pretty cool. That's a really, really big difference from Greece. Greece would not allow foreigners to be citizens, but Rome would. Once you proved your loyalty to Rome, you got your citizenship. As long as you were, a man. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you in class soon.